Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Cerberus at the Improv. I'm Payman Ascari. I'm joined today by Mr. Timothy Knight. Tim, how's it going?
It's good. It's another beautiful overcast day in the wet coast.
Indeed it is. And we also have Mr. Andre Maloche. Andre, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm fine today. Yes, because I have electricity, I have energy. We had power failure again, despite the fact that we have a new contract now. So, if I disappear during the panel, just call Hydro-Quebec because I cannot.
I hope you don't disappear, and that was a good segue because this is going to be an Andre Maloche episode about energy, Quebec and Newfoundland. So I'm just going to, instead of pretending like I have any idea what's going on, I'm just going to bring this up. Something happened in 1969. Andre, tell us what's going on with the power.
Well, 1969, I think you also had Woodstock, but we will not talk about Woodstock tonight. There was a contract that was signed between Newfoundland and Quebec for the development of Churchill Falls. But maybe I would ask Timothy to go back a little bit more in history and what triggered that contract or what brought that contract, and maybe the political aspect about I like Timothy said one time, autonomy of provinces. Maybe Tim, you can explain that.
The 69 contract is Quebec wanting to get control or to finalize an agreement between itself and Newfoundland and Labrador. If you want to bring up the map of the Churchill Falls in Labrador, so Labrador is the land section of the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, where down on the bottom southeast corner is the island of Newfoundland, and the top center on the east coast of the Quebec region is Labrador. And then toward the inland, you'll see this large lake mass, and Churchill Falls is there within the Labrador border. Prior to Newfoundland and Labrador joining Confederation, it was a colony of Britain. And as a colony of Britain, it gave the British no greater joy than to irritate Quebec at every possible turn. And so the way that just look at the Plains of Abraham, because losing 3 times wasn't enough. And so the relationship between Quebec and Newfoundland and Labrador was always difficult, but usually because of the nature of the parent political entity, which was Great Britain at the time. After the Second World War in 1949, Newfoundland and Labrador joined Confederation. Quebec was hoping that Labrador, that territory, would become part of its provincial geography, and that did not happen. So you're already setting up a relationship of hostility, political hostility between Quebec and Newfoundland and Labrador. So when it comes time for the 1969 agreement, because even though they had been talking in the 50s, it was intentionally delayed over a 10-year period. So they finally sit down and talk in 1969 and say, well, we would like to arrange for us to have access to the hydroelectric power that is available from Churchill Falls, which is one of the largest sources of electrical or hydroelectric power on the entire eastern seaboard. Then Quebec said, we will put in the bulk of the management and the development and the construction and set out the network and organize this. So they created this sub-organizations that would manage this. Once this agreement is in place and Newfoundland once again agrees to a more vassal position and is effectively left out of the major decisions, even though it's an agreement about their own resource, Quebec manages to take the lion's share. And over the years since, Newfoundland has made at least 2 failed attempts to reopen the contract in a manner that is more favorable toward the province. But Quebec has been at this game a very long time. And so now we come up with the discussion today between Quebec and the Newfoundland premiers that they have come to another agreement for an extension to this relationship that is supposed to improve Newfoundland's effectively a royalty position, so that Quebec, which has made their portion of the operation a provincially controlled entity, and if I'm right, one of those subsidiary organizations is even selling on Wall Street. So with this kind of financial power and this kind of political power that Quebec has enjoyed over the years, has effectively pressured Newfoundland once again into a vassal position. And so that's where the contract is today.
And it is interesting what you're mentioning, because when we go back in history, and if I go back to the history of Hydro-Quebec was founded in 1944, and the first nationalization or expropriation was with the Montreal Light Heat and Power. One part of it, because you had Montreal Gas and Power and Montreal Light Heat and Power. And in 1962, they were starting to have, let's say, discussion between Newfoundland about Churchill's. Because in 1950, they started to develop the Manicouagan River. And in 1965, the first 735 kilovolt line was put in operation. It was a world premiere for Hydro-Quebec. It was very interesting development at the time. And they were trying to develop big infrastructure. So Manicouagan, Berchimis, Boutard River in the north of Quebec were already started to be developed. And then they were starting to think about James Bay. Robert Bourassa, who was Prime Minister of Quebec, we say James Bay is the project of Robert Bourassa in 1979. But at the same time, they were developing Manicouagan. René Lévesque, who was the Ministry of Natural Resources in Quebec for the Jean Lesage Liberal government, he started to talk about nationalizing 8 companies of electricity: Shawinigan Water and Power, Northeast, Northern Quebec Power, Beauharnois Light Heat and Power. You have 8 companies like this, but the Shawinigan Water and Power had an engineer branch, and they were responsible. They were accorded the contract of managing the development of Churchill. So when Hydro-Quebec nationalized those 8 companies of electricity, they became shareholders up to 20% of Shawinigan Engineering. So they had leverage to pressure Churchill Falls to develop the power plant. The power plant is 5,500 megawatt, and you have 5,000 megawatt that is delivered to Quebec, and 500 megawatt, one generator that was kept for interior demand of Newfoundland. So in 1963, when the nationalization was completed, they started to have negotiation about the first contract. So the first contract was supposed to be 35, 40 years, 5 years, then 35 years. And after that, when the contract would have come at the end in 2015, if I remember, they would have another 25 years with the same price. And the price at the beginning, when it was a memorandum of understanding, was 0.3 cents, not 3 cents, but 0.3 cents, 3/10 of 3 cents, which is completely unbelievable, because at the time, the price of the market price was about 2 cents per kilowatt hour. So you could say that it was what, more 10, maybe 20 times more expensive. But at the time, also, Hydro-Quebec was developing its network, and they were starting to have an interconnection with New England, New Brunswick, New York, and Ontario. And what happened during that period, I would say from 1970 till 1980, Hydro-Quebec was selling its excedent of energy on exportation market. And they were signing long-term contract, because you need investments. So you sign a long-term contract to be able to have an investment to build the power plant. And in 1997, the market in United States was deregulated for wholesale market. And Hydro-Quebec had a presidential license to do business. And they started to sell energy on short-term market, yearly, monthly, weekly, and spot market, hourly. And they were making a lot of money. So for about 20 years, let's say from 1969, 1970, it was still okay for Newfoundland, because like Hydro-Quebec was pretending at the time, they took all the risk, they had to manage and they had the knowledge with the Manicouagan River and the Berchimis and Boutard River. They started to have knowledge with engineering. So they said, okay, we will do it. and we will sign this contract. But when Hydro-Québec started to rip off their long-term contract, when they were arriving at the end of their life, they started to sign short-term contract, and the price was not the same. So of course, when you see that you can sell the price, you can sell the energy in kilowatt hour at 8.5 cents, and you pay 0.3 cents. The huge amount of money that Hydro-Québec was making was, I would say, irritating Newfoundland. Don't forget that the energy was, the demand of energy was rising, and at the time in 1980, Hydro-Québec was selling about 5-6 terawatt-hour of energy on the external market. In 2004, they were selling 30 terawatt-hour of energy on external market, which is the amount of energy that was produced by Churchill Falls. They were selling practically all the energy that was produced by Churchill Falls on the external market. So I can understand people in Newfoundland saying, wait a second, what is happening? That's why they went 2 times, like you mentioned, Timothy, in front of the Supreme Court to invalidate the contract. And of course, they lost because it's a contract. The Supreme Court said it was due diligence. People did what they had to do, and I was part of the management at the time, and I can tell you that the negotiation never stopped. But sometimes it was quite, I would say, rough negotiation, because Hydro-Québec did not want to cede or to reopen the contract, and when they started to develop what we call Lower Churchill with Nalcor, they said, okay, we will, if you want us to transport the energy on our network, you will use our network, but you will pay the fee. So that's the time where Nalcor said, okay, we will do, they wanted to do an underground transmission link, but it would have cost a fortune to reach New Brunswick, so they abandoned the project. And now we see in 2025, they go back, now they sign a contract, but you can look at the detail of the contract. It's still, when you pay 6 cents per kilowatt hour to Newfoundland, but you can sell it on the market 12 cents per kilowatt hour. You still make a lot of money. Yet Newfoundland now, with this country of 50 years, they would have a revenue of, I calculate, I think it is $289 billion. And Hydro-Québec, without investing nothing, well, it's not true, because they will develop the third phase, but they would still make $189 billion. So without all the expense or the cost of building all those power plants. So it's a continuity. It seems that the 2 prime ministers are very happy. I'm not that sure if it is a good deal. Of course, it's a good deal for Quebec from the perspective of Quebec, but my question is, what is the national policy, the Canadian national policy? Because in 1960, Quebec said the energy sector is a provincial prerogative, and we will not agree with what was proposed. It is a national grid. Quebec was selling in 1999 to Florida. It's not a problem to. It would not have been a problem to have a national policy on energy, and it includes gas and oil too. I think it's important, because in Quebec we do not do fracking, we do not exploit gas, or we do not exploit oil. So there's a lot of things that are at stake here, and my question is, what is the national policy on energy? I think we don't have one for now.
Yeah. No, we do not have a national policy on energy, and a national policy on energy would be very geographically sensitive, right? Because different parts of Canada are capable of producing different types of energy.
Exactly, and they are complementary. That would be the beauty of it.
Yeah, and the beauty is the complementary aspect. And a national energy project, so you've got gas on 3 coasts, oil on 3 coasts, hydroelectric in British Columbia, hydroelectric in Labrador and Quebec.
Exactly.
Some hydroelectric in Manitoba.
Ontario, you have nuclear.
Ontario, nuclear power. There is even room in Canada to include wind and solar. because you look at the prairies.
Yes, which is in my opinion, it is not efficient, and has nothing to do with would say natural development.
No, my thought for including that is, it's agreed that it is not efficient, but we would be able to house it, to incorporate it as alternatives or as add-ons. I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that those alternate or green energy technologies are anything beyond 1 or 2 or 3% contributors.
Well, Hydro-Quebec in 2004, they were integrating solar. Now they were integrating a windmill, and the windmill was at the time the installed capability of Hydro-Quebec was about 40,000 megawatt, and we had about 3%, and that was the maximum because windmill is not reliable. When it is under -15, it doesn't turn. It doesn't generate nothing, and it doesn't work that it is not that efficient. The coefficient factor is about 0.3%. So you can imagine you have to compensate with hydro, or you have to compensate with thermal like a gas turbine or nuclear. Else it doesn't work.
Yeah,
not in the Nordic country.
I'm not making the comment to open up the discussion about the specific details, because we know that the existing windmill design is woefully inadequate. We know that it's woefully inadequate. So the technology has not yet given us a device that effectively takes advantage of the wind, independent of other sources. And we've all seen the photography, we've all heard the stories about how bad the current windmill design or wind turbine are structurally. My only thought is that a national energy program or policy needs to include future tech as well.
Yes,
that's all I'm saying. As far as I'm concerned, it's at this point it would be an addendum in a policy.
Well, but you see what happened in Quebec, and when they started to implement windmill, they were forcing Hydro-Quebec to sign long-term contract. Yeah. And the price at the time, that was in 2000. The price of the time, they were selling the price of windmill as 10 cents per kilowatt hour. Yeah. It is not true. It was more 20 cents. Yeah. Now it's about 15. And when you look at the amount of concrete that they need to support one windmill, it has nothing to do with environment. That's the first thing. The second thing is when you see how they use this political weapon, what I would say, to force people to change their behavior. Windmill, like I said, -15 doesn't work. Solar panel in a Nordic country, the percentage of enlightening with the sun is about 20% in winter. Doesn't work. Put a solar panel in Alberta when it is -45. We saw last year the Tesla cemetery on the highway. It was a joke. And people, they put a generator in their back trunk to be able to recharge their battery. This is completely stupid. But I agree with you. With a national policy, we would be able to determine which kind of energy would be complementary, so we could have an integrated and harmonious development. Well, this is not what we have now, and I don't think the contract that Quebec has signed with Newfoundland will help to develop a national policy, especially because now we see all the governors, men and women, who are so afraid of the tariff imposed by Donald Trump on energy. Why we need a national policy on energy. We cannot just pretend that province will work independently. It doesn't work anymore. This model does. Maybe the model never worked.
The America. This is the way I look at it. So any American who's paying attention to, like, 5 of Canada's premiers right now are listening to EB make threats about cutting off the juice to the Pacific seaboard because BC Hydroelectric provides power all the way down into Southern California. So you've got Quebec in the Newfoundland on the eastern seaboard providing power all the way down to Florida. Ontario is rattling sabers over the same issue. And Danielle Smith was talking about the Freudian slip there.
Same mind.
That's going to end up in the reel later. So and people who are these, like you said, you have these individual entities lining up along the 49th parallel, wagging their finger at America, like, you know, the big bad mom saying, if you don't clean up your room, you're going to bed without any supper. And America looks at this and goes, who the fuck are you?
Well, when I told about the visit from René Lévesque at Wall Street in 1962, he went to borrow $550 million to nationalize 8 electrical company in Quebec. Do you think there was no collateral behind?
Absolutely.
So what do you think? What do you think Wall Street asked? Maybe they said, you will open your market. We will permit you to nationalize those companies so you can have reasonable fees or reasonable tariff for electricity, because they were very different from one region to another. But you think they would have lent $550 million to nationalize the company if they did not have any political guarantees, which were at the time, I would say, signing long-term contract with Northeast of United States, New England, New York, and Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland. Then Ontario arrived. There was a lot of contracts signed with Ontario, but they were long-term contracts. In 1997, when the market was open, the wholesale market, Hydro-Québec started to scrap their long-term contract with an agreement with Ontario, and they started to rent their reservoir to store the energy, because when you have hydro and you have reservoir, you can make the level go up. And the price was completely ridiculous. And I can guarantee you in 2001, Hydro-Québec changed its policy and started to deal with Ontario. And I still remember at the time, at the end of the year, especially at this time, we had a nice message, a nice meeting with the vice president of the trading floor, who was thanking very much our Ontario colleague, for the amount of money that we made on their back in 2001. They were not ready to deal like that. And what happened after that? They started to privatize Hydro Ontario. You had Hydro One. That the tendency was there: short-term contract, no long-term vision. And it is we are now in this era where sometimes you have power outage. They don't maintain the distribution system, and they export. Now Hydro-Québec is exporting 35 to 40 terawatt-hour of energy per year, with the contract with New York and New England. And the cost price, the sale price sometimes is lower than the cost price. Can you imagine that?
Question. I got the impression that in Quebec, all power plants were private, and then they nationalized it. What was the argument in support of nationalization?
The disparity in tariff in the region. And I think at the time, the Liberal government was just newly elected after the death of Maurice Duplessis, who was from the Union Nationale. And when Lesage arrived, he had René Lévesque, who was a journalist for Radio-Canada. And René Lévesque was, would you say, nationalist person. And he was pushing to nationalize the 8 companies, because he was saying that the motto at the time was "Maître chez nous," master in your own home. And we have here, every Quebecers know what it means, "Maître chez nous," to be master in your own house. So they say we will manage our policies, and that's why after creating Hydro-Québec in 1944, they nationalized the company. Beauharnois, Shawinigan Power, Northern Quebec Power, Gatineau Power, all those small companies that were charging very different fees from one region to another. So when they nationalized, they made the tariff uniform for all Quebecers. The difference now is that 40 years after, 60 years after, Now you pay more, and you pay more money per month for a residential house. You pay more money just to be connected to the grid. You pay now for a residential house, you pay $50 per month, whether you consume or not. So you can imagine now, it is fascinating because in 1963, the price of the monthly fee was $1. So now you have some people who they have some summer house and they pay even if they're not there. They pay without consuming. So, and because we export a lot of energy, so the balance has shifted. That's why we look at a contract like this and we say, wait, is it only for exportation? And what will be the outcome of that? It is not. It is a political agreement. I think Timothy can talk about this. Yeah. You will have election in Newfoundland. I remember Joey Smallwood lost a lot in 1963, and then they all say we have to have an agreement with Quebec. Well, you can have an agreement with a mafia dealer too, but it will not be at your advantage. So I don't see. I see now. I saw comment of Quebecers. They're all happy. They're so angry about the government now after the pandemic and what they did. But now suddenly Legault is a savior. There's something under that, and it is not only for the benefit of Quebec, because healthcare system is collapsing, social services are collapsing, and they put money in the system without any efficiency, and now they arrive with a savior who finally settled, the conflict with Newfoundland. This is a political agreement. It is not for the benefit of Canadian or Quebecers, whatever.
Yeah. And it is entirely not in the benefit of Newfoundlanders.
Exactly.
Because the disparity between the price that Quebec is able to sell it and the amount of quote unquote royalty that Newfoundland will be receiving is a factor of 23.
23. It did not change the law from the first contract.
Right. And meanwhile, you have the two premiers sitting in front of a microphone saying what a really great deal it is for both provinces. They're shaking each other's hands and kissing each other's cheeks, and it's as if it's the end of the First World War. Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, the Newfoundland premier is going to take this back to Newfoundland because there is a provincial election next year, and he's going to campaign on what a fantastic job he did fighting for Newfoundlanders, going after the evil Quebecer who's harangued us for so many decades, and we finally got our piece of the pie, and didn't I do a good job? And the contract is virtually unchanged.
The pie, first of all, what you say is very important, because first of all, the pie is rotten. Last year, the ex-Ministry of Energy, Pierre Fitzgibbon, who resigned, I would say 5 months ago from the Coalition Avenir Québec, he was urging people to lower their thermostat in Quebec, to wash their clothes during the night, do not plug your electrical vehicle, because we will not have enough energy. We will be able to have a roll-up short outage. And it was like the big Sasquatch who's trying to scare people. And now they arrive with a contract that will provide 61 terawatt-hour of energy per year. The actual contract now is 31. It will double the amount of energy. And what they will say to Quebecers, wash your clothes at night, lower your thermostat, do not take a shower 1 time per week. What they will say to Quebecers, if they say this, if they keep the same message, it means that all this energy will be sold at a very cheap price to United States. That's the reality. And they will not tell you this on Radio-Canada or CBC. That's a fact.
Can I ask, why did Newfoundland agree to this terrible deal? Is it because they need Quebec's investment into the power plant upgrades?
Because historically, Newfoundlanders don't think for themselves.
Yeah, but this is next
And I
level
say
stupid.
that as a Newfoundlander. We have historically been victims of lab coat syndrome and simply refused to wake up and realize that Quebec and Ontario have absolutely zero interest in honorable agreements with Newfoundland.
Tim, this is beyond stupid though. Like you just said, they're making 23 times
Yeah.
more profit or whatever in
Yeah.
Quebec.
Yeah.
Are these Newfoundlanders? Are they just too stupid? I'm just joking. But like, did they not read the contract?
Well,
No, and they won't. They won't. The same thing happened in 1984 with the Atlantic Accord, where the Hibernia oil field off the northeast coast of St. John's had 450 tapped and capped oil wells ready to go. And I think it was Mulrooney stepped in and said, we think we need to sort out what you're going to do with all of that oil, and arranged for an Atlantic Accord agreement where the federal government took 60%. And Newfoundland was happy about this when all they had to do was do what Quebec said, and that was fuck off. This is our oil. Go, no, we're going to develop this themselves. And Newfoundlanders historically do not defend that which is their right because they want to get along. They want to be seen as look what we did during 9/11 with the thousands and thousands of people that were able to land their planes safely in Newfoundland. And that's what we want people to see. So they end up bending over and taking it hard from Quebec and Ontario and Ottawa, rather than saying
family friendly show.
Right. And so this is a dirty agreement. And they're doing it again.
We can open maybe a line of thought about Quebec and Ontario. And when you talk like this, yesterday I was listening to an interview with Michael Sabia, who's the CEO of Hydro-Quebec now. And he was talking about the price of energy. And he says the deal will be 6 cents per kilowatt hour. He said, there's no such thing as 6 cents per kilowatt hour in North America. It does not exist. So he said, somebody would make an offer like this, I will take it immediately. What he forgets that he was talking to Quebecers. Because it's in French and he's talking to Quebecers. I would be curious to hear the Prime Minister of Newfoundland, how he will sell this to his citizen. Because when they will both claim that they are winning, okay, you can have a win-win deal, but I'm curious to see, they do not disclose I would say the contract between Quebec and New England or Quebec and New York. They never disclose the details of those contracts. So when you see this, you can ask yourself, who will benefit from that? And I'm not sure it will be Quebecers, and I'm not sure it will be citizens of Newfoundland. I'm not sure at all.
It'll be the Eastern Seaboard.
Well, that's why I talk about Quebec and Ontario, and I think you backstage you mentioned the Laurentian. There's a grip on Canadian policies, and we see it. But it's very difficult to find the real actors because those two provinces, Quebec and Ontario, they always try to push aside the west part of Canada and the east part. Yeah. And I would say for political reason, I think we see it. Think about Trans Mountain. What happened? The federal government arrived and they said, okay, we scrapped Trans Mountain. And the Keystone XL pipeline, and now that Trump arrives in power, he says, "I will resuscitate the Keystone XL pipeline," and he started to make jokes about the tariff. And there was a conversation last week in Paris between François Legault and Donald Trump, and Legault asked Trump. He said, what about the 25% tariff? And Trump said, there will be no tariff if you take care of the border. So that was the message. There's no war between Canada and United States on energy. They have a national policy, or they will have a better national policy, because during the Biden era, the government dig into the strategic reserve of oil. It's the first time in the history of United States that they were going solo in the strategy reserve. And now Trump will have a national policy. It's time for Canadian or Canada to have a national policy on energy. And like you said, it would integrate all sources of energy, including nuclear. In 2012, yes. I'm sorry, it's my rant now. In 2012, the Parti Québécois government of Pauline Marois scrapped the Gentilly 2 power plant that was 650 megawatt, and for ideological reason. And now it is costing billions of dollars to not declassify, but to make it more secure storage of the waste. And now we see that there's a lot of things that's happening on the development of nuclear energy. The complete cycle of uranium is so we start to see that it is not that bad if we are not externalizing the cost or the risk. And that's what major company, what they do, they externalize the cost or they externalize the risk. And if we have a national policy, we could take in account those external costs, cost of waste. You see, Alberta oil, it has an impact on the environment. How do we mitigate those risks or those impacts? This is our responsibility, as I would say, if we would have a national policy.
Yeah. And a national policy would prevent lunatics like the current 5 or so premiers that are using energy as a saber to waggle, or a pencil to waggle in the face of America, saying, you have to get in line. I'm the boss up here. And so a national policy preempts their ability to speak independently on what is done with that resource. That doesn't stop them from the province from maintaining autonomy over the development and management of its natural resources. But it does bring them into line to say we have to be diplomatic as a national approach to our relationships with those nations to whom we deliver natural resources.
Exactly.
We have to be much more diplomatic and speak as one voice, rather than, you got 5 or 6 premiers speaking independently. And I find that convenient, because it was only a week ago when they were all saying, Trudeau, you need to manage your rhetoric and threatening counter tariffs because that's out of line. And then they took him all into a big conference phone call. And after the phone call, he comes out with a newswire saying, we're all working together. We're all a team. We're going to get this sorted out together. We're together, secure future, together, secure future, Canada, blah, 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 blah. And now they're all wagging their own independent fingers, because that's the tail wagging the dog. It's theater. It's more theater. And I'm reasonably certain that any governor who's managing, one of the states who are recipient of, Canadian resources on the electrical grid in this case, are looking at Canada going, what are you talking about? What do you think you're doing? And the root is Canada absolutely refuses to acknowledge the porous nature of our borders and the complete failure of our immigration system, absolute failure, and the abuse of the same, and the opioid crisis that continues to permeate back and forth across our borders and in our towns. And the government of the United States said, control these 2 issues. There will be no tariff. The tariff is the stick. The carrot is better immigration management system and more control and better control over the drug trade. Because look, Canada, you're responsible for this. We know it. We can prove it. Don't make us bring out the paperwork and show you, because Trump will show the world. Trump will name names. He's not afraid to name names. So if there are a way for him to find that name of 11, if he finds that 11, he'll use it. He's not stupid. Meanwhile, you've got premiers, the Newfoundland premier doing what is arguably one of the dumbest go along to get along things possibly in the history of the province, right? Because he's going to take this document and not inform the bulk of the document to Newfoundland citizens. So what they're going to get in the messaging come next year's election is they're going to see the dollar value. They're not going to see comparative dollar values. They're going to see 3 billion, which is, I mean, it's a phenomenal amount of money, but it's 1/23rd of what's available. So if it were to move more toward, say, a third, 33%, and that's being really generous in my opinion. If they were to take 33% royalty, acknowledging that Quebec is doing a lot of the development, right? So they're taking a high degree of the risk involved. So I'd be okay with that. But 23 times. And so they're not going to tell the Newfoundlanders that. And the Newfoundlanders are going to think, wow, 3 billion is a lot. And he's going to make comparisons to the Atlantic Accord. He's going to make comparisons to the Bulls Bay, which is the oil rig manufacturing facility, which is one of the best on the planet. So he's going to talk about how Newfoundlanders have come up and standing on the world stage toe to toe against Quebecers and coming out on, and they're going to buy it. And they're going to buy it. It's the same as the NDP supporters out in here continuing to support Ebbie. And the man's nuts.
Andre, I got a tough question for you. If you guys are making so much money in Quebec, why are we paying so much in equalization payments?
Well, we talked about it yesterday when we were preparing this improvisation. And, you know, the announcement between the Prime Minister of Newfoundland and the Prime Minister of Quebec, it's a show. 3 weeks ago, we were talking about Nordvolk. Nordvolk is collapsing. The EV scam is collapsing everywhere. And everybody was ready to hang the Prime Minister. And now he's a savior. We have this tendency in Canada, I don't know if it's a Canadian value, but to believe our politicians. And when you talk about equalization, because this is your question, why do we pay so many? It is 14 billion this year, I think. 14 billion again to Quebec. The healthcare system in Quebec spends $54 billion per year, which is $1 billion per week. Timothy was talking about 3 million. In 3 weeks, it is finished. You don't have any healthcare. And you see the level of bureaucracy is rising exponentially everywhere, and it is not only on the federal stage. It's also in Quebec, and there's no efficiency. We always talk about gain of productivity. There's no efficiency because the bureaucracy is monstrous. So even if you have this contract, Quebec will still pump or suck blood out of Alberta, because they will always say that we have a social system or a social program that we have to pay. They always sell, for example, the dividends or the revenue of Hydro-Quebec like, oh, it is for the social program of Quebec. We know it is not true. So where goes the money? You arrive at the end. This year, the deficit of Quebec will be close to $14 billion for a province. $14 billion. This is a huge amount of money. Where do you think they will get it? They will go and call, Legault will call Danielle Smith and says, when the check is arriving in the post. And she will say, sorry, Canada Post is on strike. I cannot send you the check. So you will say, I will pay for FedEx or UPS. But this equalization is a scam. And I think the big problem in Canada, and I'm not sure if it doesn't touch the Western world, everybody works for their own selfish interest. There's no collective thinking in Canada. Despite what we say about Canadian value, Canadian unity, it's the first time when I saw the Freedom Convoy, it's the first time in my life I felt Canadian. I'm 65. It took a long time for me to see what could be a core value between all the people, all Canadians. And I don't see it. I see politicians, they work for themselves. They work for their own interests. So, of course, they will try to sell the contract or the agreement to Quebecers that they are winning. Politicians, they want to tell you, they tell you what you want to hear. So I think the equalization has to stop, because you have to ask, honestly, Quebecers, do you want to develop your natural resources? If you don't want to develop your natural resources, but then you will live according to your income. You don't have an income, you don't have progress. There's no progress without energy. And we are a very rich country. Sorry for the Freudian slip. But no, it is important to mention it. That's I would say my old self was talking. But I think we have to scrap this and have an honest discussion. But are Prime Minister ready? My answer is no, they are not, because Doug Ford reacted in one way, Daniel Smith reacted in one way, Legault reacted in one way, David Avey, they all react in one way. They all, when it's time to fight against the federal government, they all gather together. But let's remember 1982 when they brought back the Constitution. All the prime minister went against René Lévesque during the night, and they called it the night of long knife, and they stabbed René Lévesque in the back. So do not forget that they always work against each other. They don't. First of all, they don't work for the people. They work for their own political interest. We have to break this. I would say this cartel.
It is a cartel.
I see it like this. I see
Absolutely.
it like this.
Yes, it's state-sanctioned welfare.
Yes, and equalization. It's like the contract with Newfoundland. I think it's always revenge.
Yeah.
Always revenge or manipulation.
Historical bitterness and resentment.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And the funny thing is, my generation is not familiar with it except to intentionally go and learn about it, and then my children completely removed. Meanwhile, the political parties that are engaged in these activities and these arrangements and agreements and these policies, they have a historical memory of the butthurt that happened when they, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so they continue to maintain that narrative. And it is completely dissociated from from reality for the youth today and our generation today. Like you said yourself, you have this new agreement, you're paying money for hydro, and you've experienced brownouts that are unexplainable. So you look at, and none of the parties, neither provincially nor federally, are interested in sorting out the problem with transfer payments because there's something in it for them. It was Harper who adjusted the formulas used for the transfer payments.
Exactly.
And he did not adjust them in Canada's favor. He adjusted them in Quebec's favor.
Well, that's quite strange because Harper was I would say a creation of the Reform Party. I would have expected. I would have expected that. Yeah. I would have expected that from Brian Mulroney, from Harper, but maybe Harper wanted the majority at the time, so he started to give something to Quebec so they could vote for him.
Well, and Harper signed in Agenda 2015.
Exactly.
And his last year in office, when he was admittedly more draconian, but his last year in office, he put into play the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which the Liberals had said absolutely not, because we're not giving another country's company the ability to come onto our soil and sue us for non-performance. That's just ridiculous. And then when the Liberal Party took power, they said, "Oh yeah, we tend to like this Trans-Pacific Partnership." Well, yeah, because it's going to fatten your pocket. That's why. And so, funnily enough, the party nobody wants to recognize is the only party that actually has a policy that will sort out the transfer payments, and that's the People's Party of Canada, where they actually have a policy that says we are going to encourage and support the provinces to, like you said, Andre, develop their own natural resources according to their own internal means, and the federal government will support them in that process as we reduce transfer payments over time.
Exactly.
until the individual provinces. And this also supports the Constitution in that the individual provinces are recognized and finally receive the transfer of their jurisdiction over their own concerns. Right. So and so what ends up happening is you got Quebec, who is managing their own concerns despite all of these other issues, blaming Canada for Meech Lake, et cetera, and doing their own thing. And then dragging Newfoundland along with, who simply isn't paying attention. They're simply not paying attention. And this confounds the problem, continuously confounds the problem. So all of these shenanigans of renegotiating so that we can get another few percentage out of it. And there's the saber rattling along the 49th parallel by 5 or 6. Doug Ford, are you kidding? Like, if they cut off Windsor, Ontario dies. Right? Well, right? If
I don't see the downside in that. What is that?
See the downside in that. So the regular Canadian needs to find a way to look at Canadians who are living in Quebec, and Canadians who are living in Manitoba, Canadians who are living in Newfoundland or Alberta or Ontario, and say, we need to sort this out collectively, because our leadership at all levels have absolutely lost their marbles, and we are the ones paying for it. Quebec Hydro is selling at a loss to external markets so they can say they have a market.
Well,
and the Quebecers are picking up the difference.
I was a business trader at Hydro-Quebec, and I witnessed a lot of things about how you can manipulate the market. In 2002, we were selling to 2001, we were selling to United States, and we took a position of, if I remember, it was 400 or 500 megawatt for 5-6 hours on a daily basis. And we were able to secure a price of $950 per megawatt, which is 95 cents per kilowatt. At the same time, on the hourly market, we bought back the energy because we flood the market with energy. And so the price collapsed, and we bought back the same amount of energy for $50, which is 5 cents. So we made 90 cents of profit without delivering nothing. The next day, the lawyers of Wall Street were in the office of my boss saying, what did you do? You manipulated the market. And after that, they arrived, and the New York independent system operator, because it was in New York, they voted a law, what they call energy extraordinary corrective measure, because it was a hole in the rule, and we took advantage of it. I can tell you, Americans, they didn't like it when you screw them.
Yes.
Especially when you go around and it was, manipulating the market. It was not manipulating the market. It was using the market against itself.
Yeah.
So that, we made $4 million in 4 hours, and they didn't like it at all. After that, they put a corrective measure. Why I say this is because if we deal honestly, we share the risk. We share the risk together, and we benefit together from the profit. That's the way. If I lend you money and I ask you an interest rate, you will pay the interest rate, and we will share the risk together. I lend you money and I ask an interest rate to cover a part of the risk. And if you're a good businessman, you will do profit, and I will benefit from it. So we are both winning. Now, it is not what I'm seeing. What I'm seeing is all the two parties are saying that they're both winners.
Yeah.
Who's taking the risk? Like I say, the ex-minister of energy was saying to Quebecers, we will not have enough energy in winter. You have to wash your clothes at night. And who's taking the risk? Canadians? Yes.
Taxpayer.
Corporations? No. They always transfer the risk. And why I refer to corporation is that it is systematic. And where I say government, like if it is a private company that develops the new project in Churchill, yes, because they manage the risk and they have access to profit. But the common good should have access to the energy. What we have to say is cheap energy, as That was the purpose of the nationalization in 1963. They wanted to have cheap energy or the same tariff for every Quebecers. I would expect the same thing for Canadians, the same price for everybody, and we would share the risk together. That's, for me, that would be a Canadian value. And I don't see this because each province now, like, they work for their own interest. It's okay to work for your own interest, but sometimes you have to put your own interest aside and try to work with other people. Else it is not, there's no diplomacy.
Tim, if you want to, I don't know, it seems like you want to add something, and then we should go to the border, the last issue.
Right. So my thought on that Andre's pointed out is the third party in all of these agreements is the taxpayer, because they are the primary funding agent. And that taxpayer has received no benefit from these arrangements, except to also pay for the product. So not only are they paying as an investor into these agreements and these programs, these projects, they are also paying for the final product. But if I go into, let's say, an OPEC country, I pay almost nothing for the product and I get a dividend. And that does not happen in North America. And so a national energy policy would include some form of dividend also paid to the citizen.
I can agree with that.
So I'm my primary interest in any policy that's enacted is to recognize who the actual funding agent is. And it's not Lloyd's of London, right? It's not the Bank of Canada. It's not Bank of America. It's the taxpayer. And the taxpayer must also receive a dividend for their contribution to the project.
I can tell you now, the dividend that I would like as a customer and a resident of Quebec is no power outage and no power failure for 1 year, because now that is true. People now are starting to be worried when you have power outage like this in winter. Me, yes. I have a well here. I don't have water. Imagine last week they were having rollout outage in Montreal because they cannot supply the energy and the power. So the dividend could be, can we have a secure, would say, amount of energy for each Canadian?
So that's a delivery guarantee.
Well, at least the delivery guarantee, it means that at least you will not freeze to death, or you will be able to feed your kids at night. It is not funny at all, and I don't know. It touches Quebec, but last year it touched Alberta too. Alberta, the grid was at its maximum, and the Prime Minister was asking people to save energy. And when it's minus 45, it's not a question of it is funny to save energy. You don't have energy, you die. Yes, you die. That's simple as that. That's so. The dividend you're referring to, I would say, securize the energy, I would say.
I mean, it's you went without power. And did people in the United States serviced by that same power line, did they go without power?
No, because all the interconnection are separated. They're not synchronized. Or they have what we call HVDC, high voltage direct current system, which desynchronize both network. American, they look at our network in Quebec and they say it's not possible. The frequency, because most of the production in United States, it's either nuclear or gas turbine. And gas turbine, the frequency is very stable. Here it is not. It is stable, but you have to desynchronize the two network. The idea is also, do you have a reliable source of energy? That's the question, and maybe that would be the dividend. And we have no reason not to have a reliable source of energy. We are rich in Canada, extremely rich.
If your primary policy as a federal government is Canada first, then stable delivery of services and resources to your citizens should be first.
Exactly.
And that should I would almost put that into the Constitution.
well, Constitution, freedom of speech, freedom of doing businesses. We see it.
Yeah.
Yes, we can write it in the Constitution. We just hope that the federal government will respect it.
Well, I should respect it.
We know.
Don't hold your breath. Yeah, yeah.
That's a
I
different.
remind you of the Freedom Convoy. Yeah.
Exactly.
The last thing that we're going to be talking about is the border, the crime. There was a news item released earlier today, a couple of hours ago, with something like 300,000 passports, Canadian passports, got released, stolen. And I don't know if this is why Trump is threatening this 25% tariff, or if it's just going to make it even worse. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
Trump's primary purpose for waiving the tariff threat over Canada was to get control of the illegal immigration and to get control of the opioid crisis moving in back and forth across the Canadian borders. That's his primary purpose. All the other talking heads out there making noise about retaliatory tariffs or complaint, what exactly is a tariff? And they're all going off on these, so many other talking heads like ourselves on YouTube and Rumble and whatnot are talking about the tariffs and what is a tariff and what does free trade look like? What does trade look like? And that's all a distraction. It's all a distraction. Will Trump maintain the tariffs if we do actually sort these issues out? No, because he said it live so many times. His feet are now held to the fire, and when he says a thing, he generally does the thing.
I guess the reason I bring it up, Tim, is
ourselves. We need to control these two issues. For ourselves, we need to control this. So you take Trump out of the picture. This is outlandish. This is outlandish. Right, the amount of fentanyl and other opioids moving in and out of the major cities across Canada is insane. 155 British Columbians died last month from fentanyl poisoning, fentanyl overdoses. 155.
How many would that have made? What's the purpose behind?
Right. Well, that's a larger conversation.
I agree with you, but when you say this, you see the federal policies now toward the border and toward the control of immigration.
Yeah.
It's not. First of all, I think Trump is right to do it, to point the problem. Then will they fix the problem in Canada? I can bet you they will not.
No,
they will be forced. They will be forced.
It's Trudeau and the premiers are not motivated, not motivated by Trump, except to poke the bear a little bit more, or the eagle, I guess in this case.
The beaver, the bear,
right?
Okay.
Right, to irritate the American eagle a little bit more by waving our hockey sticks and banging our hockey sticks on the side panel as if that means a thing, because the 75% of our trade is with America. So the Eastern Seaboard and the Western Seaboard are our primary purchasers of energy by a long shot, by a significant margin. All Trump has to say is to the states is, we will sort out your power situations. We will make sure you get that energy. We have those reserves. We'll carry you through. And it'll be a week, 2 weeks of us not selling resources to the states. And even less than that, 3 days of them saying, yeah, no more Canadian goods across the border. And Canada will be on its knees bending and saying, where do we sign? Right? This is ludicrous. This is ludicrous. The hubris of Trudeau thinking that he can wag a finger at the United States, the single largest economic force in the entire planet, is absolute lunacy. I mean, not only is Trudeau the Mad Hatter, but he's also the Dormouse, and she was more nuts than the rest of them combined. It's lunacy. I can't even wrap my head around how ridiculous it is, and for Canadians to support this anti-tariff trade we are the small dog here. We are the small dog here. And all he's asked us to do, right? Yes. All he's asked us to do is sort out your immigration problem, stop with the drug flow, and things will go back to normal. That's all he's asked for. But Trudeau started those problems, and he's not about to admit that they're out of control.
Psychopath never admits his problem. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is I think he's not the only one in Canada who acts like this.
No,
we see all prime minister. I would not talk about maybe Scott Moe, but all the rest of them. They all panicked with one comment. And when we look at what is happening toward immigration, toward would say what payment you were referring the passport. It's what there was a joke in 2015. Now it would be funny to see what is happening with in Syria. But in 2015, they were saying, you want to come to Canada, you want to have a Canadian passport, go to Syria first. No, it was a joke, but it was not really a joke because people were saying it's so easy to act the Canadian immigration that it's easy. Roxham Road, they closed it and they bought now a refugee, quote unquote. They buy a plane ticket and they arrive at Pearson Airport.
Yeah,
what's the difference?
And these numbers are from 2014 to 2015, so they're already 10 years old.
10 years old, yes.
Already 10 years old. So let's do a little bit of math. How many people applied for Canadian citizenship between 2014 and 2015, and then you just flip that on a comparative, oh my goodness, formula, 300,000 over X applications, and then take today's how many immigrants applied for Canadian citizenship this year, and just figure out the difference, and then you can map the graph. Right?
It is
300,000 stolen and or missing and or whatever in 2015. It's including blank passports. Blank passports, that's insane. So you're looking at a couple of million by this time. You're looking at a couple of million this time, because you just take the numbers and multiply them by 10, because you look at the graph of how many. So 2014, 2015, that means they would have come into Canada the last year that the Conservatives were in power. So you can take that number of immigrant applications during Harper's last year in power, compare that against, so you got 300,000 of those. You take last year's total number of immigrants and then just do the math. $10 says you're looking at a factor of 10.
It is
away with it since then. How much further back does that go?
Well, you're mentioning I would say the problem, the huge increase.
Yes,
but it is systematic. It is a systemic problem. It doesn't touch only immigration. It touches everything.
And it doesn't touch one party, because those numbers are
there's only one party, Timothy.
Those numbers initially happened during Harper's reign. So the Conservative Party is in on this too.
Are we talking about what we call the continuity of power, when they were saying that Trump was still the president between 2000 and 2024? The continuity of power in Canada.
Yeah, we're child friendly, so I can't cuss. But yeah,
well,
the shenanigans continue, and where one party left off, the other party reframes it and then continues the same way, because the only thing that's changed is the recipient of the check.
So the reason I brought up this article, the timing, so Trump has made this 25% tariff threat, which has been blown out of proportion, but it's based on the border, immigration, and drugs. This article, maybe it's from the CIA, maybe it's just the Trump administration, but it's saying the cartels are running the border. When I say cartel, it's like a mafia loosely.
Well, no, criminal gang. I wrote a text this week because I hosted a space, and in the text I was saying that a young man, a young boy, 14 years old, attacked the Hells Angel in the center of Quebec with a Kalashnikov, and he was killed. What does a young boy of 14 years old, what does he do with a assault weapon? There are criminal gangs in Montreal that control the drug dealing, and they are challenging old criminal cartel. Like why I talk about the Hells Angels?
Right. So you're specifically talking about Chechens, Syrians, Sudanese.
Well, yes, and they you know what, they recruit younger and younger people, and they control, and they're very violent. I think Trump understands that this will destroy social cohesion.
Yeah, and these gangs can recruit younger Canadians and younger immigrant, like teenage one, because Canada's Young Offenders Act protects them.
Exactly. That's one thing. The other thing is we are facing a collapse of all institutions, and it includes the police, or it includes the education, and it has an impact on younger generation. How do we get out of that? How can we get out of a problem where people in power now created this problem? They are not the solution. They are incompetent, and they are dangerous for our system. Maybe that would be the message for Canadian.
And if we're curious about how this is happening with organizations or criminal organizations along the border, I'll say one word: OCA.
What?
1990. Exactly. OCA.
And all
the
they were doing
OCA
was
Reserve.
Booze and cigarettes.
The OCA Reserve and the OCA crisis in 1990, and it's still going on, huh?
I just wanted to add one more thing. So the purpose of this article, this guy is saying that the order came down from high above to, just process people as quickly as possible. So the Liberal Party, whatever reason, for diversity, whether it's for Canada Pension Plan, they're bringing in, they told Canada Border Services, just bring in as many people as you can. And then I think the organized crime is just like, all right, let's take advantage of this. Like they created the opportunity.
Well, you can make a parallel with Biden administration and Trump. Now they're rushing to send everything they have in Ukraine, because after that it will be hard for Trump to make peace or to negotiate with Russians. But the liberals, they're in panic, and they try everything to undermine their own power, their own political power. Look at Freeland now. She's completely It's very funny to.
You interviewed Randy Hillier, and he talked about this to a degree, but on a separate interview, Brian Peckford talked about it as well, and that is, let's just look at Parliament as an example, or Hillier's part would be the Ontario legislature. These structures, these organizations and systems have subsystems in place that provide self-correcting mechanisms for democracy, republic, or this particular style of government that is being operated in these facilities. So there will be departments whose sole job is to go over the numbers again, or sole job is to go over the language again to tighten it up, and whose sole job is to make policy that works with the legislation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And independent reviewers, independent bodies that are looking for corruption and making sure that this lobby group is, that they're above board, et cetera. Over time, these offices and departments, etc., are understaffed intentionally, right? Or their budgets are declined or elements intentionally by those who do not want these self-corrective measures to work. And then as new blood comes in and learns the ropes, these departments have been closed, or they're ineffective, or they're just ghosts of what they once were. Right? And Peckford talks about this, and Hillier talks about this a little bit as well. So what ends up happening is, as newer blood comes in, the older the system becomes obsolete, and it is now the checks and balances that used to actually be in place that did indeed work have been underfunded or understaffed, or simply shut down for inactivity or it's 2015, et cetera, you name it, right? Or they put into the department manager or whatnot will be somebody who's completely sold out to the woke objective, or whatever mandate letter they've been given at the time from a political party in power. And this has been happening for 20, 30 years or so. So over time, these systems collapse or become obsolete. New blood comes in and they're completely unaware of it. They're completely unaware of it. So then the old, and I wouldn't even say the old guard, because they take their golden parachute and off they go. So what remains is this thick, old, career-long bureaucratic layer with which, people like Soros has straight up said, was it Soros? The other one, Schwab. We have half of your government.
Exactly.
So if they have half control or influence on half of the elected body, how much more control or influence do you think is on the bureaucratic layer?
Well,
right? So if that's what's meant to defend the system, to maintain the system, and you remove it, now you're gutless. So all you have to do is you say to people like the Sabrin, just do your job. We want to just do your job. And he has no recourse. He has no recourse because his recourse has been shut down.
Well, you understand that the whistleblower, they always go out because they say, I don't want to just do my job like in the Nazi regime. I just do my job. No, why you that it's not a question of loyalty or respecting authority or hierarchy. It's you have to be, you have to have integrity. And no, I just do my job. The bureau, you mentioned Klaus Schwab's and the fact that he bragged about the fact that he owned or he infiltrated half of the cabinet of the Liberal. Like you said, it's a pyramid. So all the rest, they're all subjected to this structure. Yeah. And now we see it. Inefficiency is everywhere. And we cannot get out of it unless each citizen acknowledge the fact that we are the structure is corrupted, and what can I do individually to change that? It is not, you don't ask people to be savior or to change completely their behavior, but try to think a little bit more outside of the box, outside of the matrix.
What do they say? The first step to solving a problem is admitting you have one.
Exactly.
It's like an alcoholic will not stop drinking.
Well, it takes a long time, and many people they will never acknowledge that because it is too frightening to live in reality. They prefer to live in a virtual reality than acknowledging the problem. And when the problem hits them, after that, many people they play the victim. I did enough psychology to understand all the process, and I say to people, it will not help you if you continue to avoid the reality. It is not easy. People have to suffer to understand. This is a normal and natural pattern for people.
Yeah, it's something that I've said many times, and that is, no parent revolts who sends their child to bed with a full stomach.
Well,
and that speaks to panem et circenses, right? Bread and circuses. And we feel that the taxation pressure, the social pressure, the cultural pressure, the economic, we feel all these pressures that seem to be increasing over the last 10 years in particular, especially since Trudeau stepped into power. And we feel like we can't do anything. So we wring our hands, we blame the other guy and say, it's not, I can only do so much. I can only do so much. But something that the three of us talk about oftentimes is become engaged locally. Because from your local institutions, whether it be your own strata council or your school board or your municipal, your town hall, other organizations that you work with, become involved with those and learn how these structures work and participate in them. Because out of those will come the next leaders.
Exactly. The new generation will be the leader of tomorrow. And if they are not prepared for that, they will face huge problems and they will not be able to overcome those problems. That's a reality. It is not the fact. We cannot accuse any generation, but we can work together. It's not possible if you do not open your eyes to what is happening now, especially when we see the level of the debt, when we see the skyrocketing of the inflation, and it is not possible. immigration problem. So, and corruption. Let's say it. Corruption.
Corruption.
People benefit from that.
Correct.
There's a lot of people who benefit from that. Now,
Yeah.
Canada Post. Now the government will pass a law so they can go back temporarily until May. So what? They can deliver the 10 million packets that are standing there for Christmas. Santa Claus will be relieved. You will not have to use FedEx.
Well, that's okay. So you're familiar with the movie Gladiator. So now we have to take a scene where Commodus has sent his spies and cottoned on that his sister has been aiding the enemy and has taken her son prisoner and says, I'm going to keep him, but I'm going to keep him alive, and I'm not going to kill you either. And she tries to have reason with him, and he becomes angry and says, am I not merciful? And this, I've been wrong on all of my predictions so far, so why not? I'm waiting for the moment when Trudeau stands in front of a microphone and says, am I not merciful?
You will wait forever. It will not happen.
I think Joaquin Phoenix pulled it off better than Trudeau could.
Yeah, Joaquin Phoenix did a much more believable job. Yeah.
I told you last week in the panel we had. I hope it will not be a Ceausescu solution. Yeah. No, because they don't want to get they don't want to go out of power. They continue to drive the car toward the wall, and they accelerate the speed. Now there was a signaler who was there. It's Donald Trump with a red light and says, I tell you that you will hit the wall.
Yeah.
I don't want to stop you. I just warn you, you will hit the wall.
Right. Well,
it's the wall that Biden was removing from the south.
There's a lot of conflicting symbolism there, Andre.
Well, it's actually that's the
language is symbols.
Yeah. That's yes. Language is all symbols. Don't let's get us started talking about Carl Jung. Why would Trump realistically stop the Canadian government from completely collapsing when it is nothing but financial and resource benefit to the United States, which is preparing to move into an era of protectionism?
I can say something about people and structure. I remember many years ago when I was working at Hydro-Quebec, I said, you have 3,000 skilled people in this building. Burn down the building and ask the 3,000 people to rebuild the process. They will do it in 3 weeks. Kill the 3,000 people and keep the building. It will take 3 generations to rebuild all those processes. And why I say this, it's because many Canadians, they have skills, they have knowledge, they have know-how, and Trump knows that. And I think he wants to bring back this know-how for the United States. And we have morons in the power here who do not want to bring back those skills, knowledge. I'm sorry.
Would you say that Trump wants to make Canada great again? Is that the message?
Well, the message. Well, he was elected
the great state of Canada again.
He was elected on the base of making America great again. Industrialization of Canada would be a good thing. We would develop our natural resources. We would work together instead of fighting between provinces. We could be able to collaborate. There's no interprovincial commerce now. You have barriers everywhere, and everybody saying, "Oh, it's my small sovereignty." What about, like Timothy says all the time? What about autonomy, not sovereignty, not protectionism inside of our own borders? And then after that, we can have a strong negotiating position with our allies and neighbors. He's our neighbor.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh Lord.
So he has something. Your dog has something to say.
Respect the Constitution. Respect the Constitution. And the thing is, the provinces have also declined to take on their jurisdiction and their autonomy according to the Constitution, because by and large, they've got a pretty good relationship with Ottawa.
Yes. Well, they comply with the mandate in 2021.
Right, they complied, and they became the hammer, right? So Trudeau was the voice, and they became the hammer, and then they passed that down to small businesses using the same pressure. So the small business says, well, I was only doing what I was told.
So the structure of fascism, or the ideology of fascism, rests on the shoulder of everybody. We are part of a structure, and we have to acknowledge the fact that if we are promoting ideas that we are against, we're part of it. So if we are, I would say to people, if you see something that goes against your value, just say it. You don't have to say it on social media. Talk to your friend, talk to your family, try to enlighten people. It's not that difficult to have a good conversation when people are open. The big problem today is that social media disturbs all the relationship between people. And I think that politicians, they use it as a weapon all the time to divide us.
So we're approaching the 90-minute mark, and my dog has voiced his criticism. He wants me to take him for a walk. We covered a lot of ground this week. Andre, thank you for sharing your wealth of information on the energy sector.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
I plug my phone into the wall and it charges. I told you I'm a network guy. I don't really respect you energy guys. It's just something that happens on the background. But no, thank you very much. And yeah, I guess we'll see you guys next week.
Next week, very much. Just before Christmas.
Sorry for the dropout. I had a power outage.
I'm happy. It did not happen. It did not happen.
No. Well, fingers crossed next week it won't happen either.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Have a good day.